Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Spring 2024 Investor Conference. My name is Roger Weiss, and I'm a Vice President of Lytham Partners. In this presentation, we welcome Beyond Air, NASDAQ ticker symbol XAIR, and with us today is their CEO and Chairman, Steve Lytham. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that management is available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you've not already signed up, please send me an email at weiss@lythampartners.com or visit www.lythampartners.com/spring2024 and click the one-on-one meeting request button. All right, Steve, let's begin.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here and give some of you a little background on Beyond Air and what we do. So our obligatory forward-looking statements. So nitric oxide is a molecule that many of you are probably not familiar with. It's not nitrous, it is nitric, and that's what Beyond Air is about. So nitric oxide is a simple combination of nitrogen and oxygen in a very specific manner. In the human body, it exists in 3 separate isoforms. As you can see on the slide here, there's a description of the different isoforms, and our therapeutic targets are hitting each one of these 3. I think it's important to note that endogenous nitric oxide or nitric oxide produced by the human body and exogenous nitric oxide are 100% structurally identical and physiologically indistinguishable in the human body. So when we introduce external nitric oxide to the human body, it does not notice the difference from internally manufactured nitric oxide. This is critically important. There's no side effects. We don't have any adverse reactions, etc. So today, nitric oxide, which has been on the market for 25 years, is used exclusively in the ICU. We hope to bring that usage out of the ICU and into the rest of the hospital and into the home as well. So we've done studies in both areas. And I'll go through those in a little bit. So here's a little overview of the company. Our revenue guidance for our FDA-approved product, which you see here in the middle of the screen, is $12 to $16 million for our fiscal year, which ends March 31st, 2025. As you can see, we had about $31 million as of December 31st, but we also did have a $16 million raise in March, so we have a pretty strong balance sheet. With respect to our patents, we have more than 15 issued patents that extend up to 2040, and we have another 10 plus pending patent applications that can extend our patent life through 2044. And we have obviously patented our system itself, breathing circuits associated with it, our delivery systems, our filtration system, action in the body, etc. So how does it work? We have our patented plasma pulse technology, and what we do is we suck air in from the room, so we use ambient air or room air, and we push it through this small chamber, which would fit in the palm of your hand. And as the oxygen and nitrogen are pushed through, it goes through this wall of plasma pulsing. And as it does that, the oxygen and nitrogen molecules are recombined or combined into nitric oxide. As an offshoot of this, you have something called nitrogen dioxide, which is toxic. So what we have is our patented nitrogen dioxide or NO2 smart filter that takes out this toxic gas and leaving you with pure nitric oxide entering into the circuit, which goes into the patient. Just mention all patients are on some sort of ventilation. So when you get into the ventilator circuit, it's pure nitric oxide. So as you can see, our FDA-approved product is on the left-hand side here. It's on a nice cart, so there's plenty of storage space and so forth. But our other products, LungFit Pro and LungFit Go, Pro is used in the hospital setting for treating respiratory infections, and Go is used to treat respiratory infections at home. Both of these are not FDA-approved. They are in development and are in currently, the LungFit Pro is in a clinical study, and LungFit Go will be in a study shortly. So here's our pipeline. And we are a medical device at FDA. So, of course, we're approved for the acronym Persistent Pulmonary Hypertension of the Newborn, or PPHN, covers the approval in newborn babies in the U.S. We have a partnership in Asia, ex-Japan, with Getz Healthcare. We expect to get approval in Europe later this year. Outside of the United States, nitric oxide is not just used for these newborn babies, but it's also used in cardiac surgery patients. It's a small percentage of cardiac surgery patients, but they need nitric oxide. It is standard of care. In the United States, it is not yet on label, so we're attempting to get that on label. We should expect a decision from FDA in the back half of this year. This would put us in a different category versus our competitors. So again, I mentioned our other machines, LungFit Pro and Go. So Pro is in the middle of a study for pneumonia in the hospital. That would include COVID-19 patients as well. And we've done several studies in bronchiolitis, which is essentially pneumonia in babies. Our LungFit Go, we did complete a study in 2022 during the pandemic for non-tuberculous mycobacterial lung infection. This is NTM lung infection. It's a horrible infection. We treated refractory patients, so those who failed antibiotic therapy. Cystic Fibrosis Foundation was our partner on this, and we'll be discussing with FDA later this year the next steps with this program. So we have two subsidiaries. One is wholly owned. It's called Neuronos. They focus on autism. Autism is the one program that we don't put nitric oxide from outside the body that we created inside the body. This is actually a blocker of nitric oxide production in the brain. There's overproduction of nitric oxide in autistic patients. We licensed this program a few years back, and we're going to be entering humans next year. So it's very exciting since there's a huge unmet medical need in autism. Beyond Cancer, this is not wholly owned. We own 80% of the subsidiary, and they've completed their first phase 1A study in humans. It was very successful. They'll show some data at the ASCO conference coming up in a few weeks. And by the end of this year, they will have started up a study with their UNO therapy. It's called ultra-high nitric oxide because we use greater than 10,000 parts per million of nitric oxide, which is a huge dose, and it will be in combination with anti-PD-1 therapy. So I'll just pause for a moment on dosing. The current approved dose for nitric oxide is 20 parts per million to treat these newborn babies in cardiac surgeries. We are treating lung infections at 150 parts per million up to 250 parts per million. We're using over 10,000 parts per million to treat cancer. So it's a completely different world when you're talking about the concentration of nitric oxide with cancer. So obviously it's an intratumoral injection, so there's no effect on the rest of the human body, which is, I make it sound simple, it's not so simple. So the markets are quite large, huge unmet medical needs. Right now, only approved for the first indication, PPHN. That's about a $350 million opportunity in the United States and $700 million globally. That's the market itself. Okay. So I will go into the approved product or the approved indication, excuse me. This is called PPHN, as I said, but the real indication we're approved for is to improve oxygenation and reduce the need for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation in term and near-term neonates with hypoxic respiratory failure. That's 34 weeks of gestation and greater. Okay, but we say PPHN, it's much easier. Okay, so here's why PPHN occurs in these newborn babies, and then what happens with certain cardiac surgery patients. All these patients end up having hypoxic respiratory failure, but obviously for slightly different reasons. So if anybody wants to take a look at this slide later, they can. So this is just a little background on nitric oxide. 1992, molecule of the year, Nobel Prize in 1998. And 1999, the first nitric oxide delivery system was approved. You can see a picture of it here. It looks a little different than the current versions. And that final current version was approved in 2014. This is the market leader. In 2018, there was another cylinder-based system that was approved. As you notice on these pictures, these cylinders, there are 2 cylinders on the back of each machine. These cylinders weigh over 40 pounds each. These cylinders on carts with delivery systems are over 170 pounds. There was in 2019 a non-cylinder offering approved. This does not generate nitric oxide from urine like we do. This is a cassette or cartridge of a poison gas. The symbol is N2O4. We're NO, nitric oxide, they're N2O4, and they convert into nitric oxide. But it is a difficult process versus what we do. In 2023, you had some more cylinder guys coming in, another Me Too cylinder system, and then a mini cylinder system, which, again, all the cylinders come with a lot of problems. So in 2024, we applied, or earlier, we actually applied for it, in early 24, we applied for our cardiac surgery indication. And at the end of this year, give or take, we will be submitting our next generation LungFit PH product. It's the same concept, but it'll be half the size and half the weight of our current offering. Okay. And we think that by the end of 2025, the era of LungFit PH second generation will begin, and that will be the dominant player in the market. So a snapshot of our product. We have a 24/7 partnership program with all of our hospitals. Since this is a critical care device and life-saving, we need to be 24/7. Again, with generating nitric oxide from ambient air, we've gotten rid of source supplies like cylinders or these cassettes. We can deliver our set dose in less than a minute. We're significantly faster and simpler than the competition. This enhanced efficiency allows hospital staff more time for patient care. So we have no special storage or disposal requirements. We're giving the hospital back real estate. There's no hazardous materials with us. There are for all of our competitors. Significant time is saved with our system based on pre-use checkout and maintenance. The NO2 filter is very important, obviously, but we change it every 12 hours, no matter what the setting is on the ventilator. It doesn't make a difference. This provides consistency and certainty for hospital staff. Very important for them. As our competitors, they can empty their sources of nitric oxide at random times. And I mentioned nitrogen dioxide or NO2, this poison gas. If you stop flow, it will just fill up in the lines. We don't have that problem. We're using room air. Our competitors do, and they would have to purge. It is a safety issue, and it also saves time for the staff. Again, we're unlimited source of nitric oxide. There's nothing to stop us. There's no room air or no ambient air when no one's here. So our source always exists. Inside of our system, there was a picture earlier, there are 2 of these generators in each LungFit system, just in case, again, a critical care product. And again, overall NO2 exposure is reduced. We have no risk from room air, our source, and our LungFit system will not initiate nitric oxide production without our filter in place. So if our system is sitting around, it can't harm anyone. And last thing I'll mention is that we have no special power requirements. Plug it into any outlet, no problem. And of course, improved operating economics for the hospital overall, very important. So why have we not taken over this market? It's simple. There was a pandemic, took a very long time to get our product approved. Some of the ventilators we need to be compatible with kind of went past what our system was able to do when we, froze our design back in 2019. So we had some compatibility issues. There were limitations on certain systems. We also had our sensor accuracy was not optimal. We had some back pressure issues while bagging. Bagging is, manual ventilation of the patient. And our compressor was not perfect. It was really good, but not perfect. So with our software upgrade, we got late last year, we are now the gold standard. So what this software update has done for us is it gives us the best performance with any high-frequency ventilator or high-flow nasal cannula systems. We're number 1 there. Our sensor accuracy is now perfect. There's no one better in the market than us on sensors. We have no issues while we're bagging at higher flows. Those are eliminated, and our compressor performance is now optimized. So with that, we are now kind of pushing back into the market and saying, hey, all of the limitations prior are now gone. So prior to this software update, we did have hospitals using our system, and they loved it. Yet a lot of them are waiting until we got this software update. So here it is. Our supply is increasing as we're starting to manufacture more. Very important to upgrade our existing customers first and bring new customers on later. We're kind of doing a little bit of both. As you can see at the bottom here of this slide, our annualized contracted revenue on April 1, 2024 was up 40% compared to January 1, 2024. Prior to Jan 1, there was no upgraded software system. So after Jan 1, it existed. Again, a lot of our existing customers were upgraded, and now we're able to focus on new customers. So we anticipate on July 1st, the growth will exceed 40% over April 1st of 2024. So that would be better than the growth we saw in the previous quarter. So it's very exciting to see this kind of growth and things taking off for us. So now I'm going to jump into nitric oxide treating lung infections. I mentioned these 2 systems, one's for hospital, one's for home. They both kind of look like this. The home system will be a little bit smaller. Again, plug it into any electrical outlet, no special power requirements. The filter will program everything. So you plug it in and the program is done. The user has to do nothing. except just press the play pause button. So again, they can press play and then pause it if they need to answer the phone or the door or something like that. Not a problem. And we do have alarms on here for nitric oxide, the toxic nitrogen dioxide, as well as oxygen, just to make sure that all those gases are within the range that were set by the filter. Okay. In the hospital will be a respiratory therapist who's administering this, but obviously at home, the patient can do it themselves. So we've done over 5,000 administrations to over 170 patients in 12 different clinical settings. We've had 0 serious adverse events related to nitric oxide in these patients, and these are concentrations above 80 parts per million. So 80 is a magic number because FDA's approval at 20 parts per million. The range is from 1 to 80. So you can treat up to 80 with the current approved systems, not just ours, but everybody else's. Going above 80, you cannot do. So we tested patients above this 80 parts per million number, with most of these patients at 150 to 250 parts per million. In fact, almost all of them were in that range. Now, the reason, and we've done extensive animal studies to corroborate this as well. The reason there's no safety issues is, one, our NO2 filter, so there's no NO2 toxicity, and two, we control something called methemoglobinemia. If you continue to treat with nitric oxide and don't stop, your methemoglobin levels will rise. This could be a problem for patients. So what we do is we treat intermittently. You can see on the slide here that if you treat, methemoglobin rises, and when you stop, it goes right back to baseline every single time. So we haven't had any instances of anyone, breaking this pattern. So this keeps the patient safe. So I'll jump into our hospital setting where we're treating pneumonia patients, again, infants and adults. So obviously, nitric oxide, I'll just pause for a second. This is a broad spectrum anti-infective. We have data preclinically showing it kills viruses, it kills bacteria, fungi, parasites, etc. So, some easier than others, but it is broad spectrum and has general killing of all of these things. Again, nitric oxide is used by the human body naturally in the innate immune system to target invading pathogens. It's one of the methods that the body uses. Okay. Here we go. Our study is going to extend over this current winter season that we completed and next winter, and we will discuss with FDA if we can do a registration study in the 25-26 winter season, and that would also be pending appropriate financing as well. So our trial in adults in Israel, you can see we did 150 parts per million of nitric oxide 4 times a day, plus standard of care. Again, standard of care alone. Very simply, we had no adverse events that were related to the drug or the device, as you can see here. Very safe. And the baseline characteristics were fairly similar between the groups. Our NO2 levels were below the safety limit of 5 parts per million, and our methemoglobin levels were below the safety limit of 10% in this particular study. So from a safety perspective and baseline characteristics, very good. As you can see also here, we did 35 subjects. This was during the pandemic, so it was a little chaotic situation. But 16 patients got nitric oxide and 19 were on standard of care. So how did the efficacy look? Duration of hospital stay was trending in our favor and reduced, but time to reach oxygen saturation. So in other words, how long did it take patients not to need oxygen any longer inside the hospital and out of the hospital? So we monitored them in the hospital. We had very good results. You can see from the middle box, the separation of the curves was rapid. And just to hit a p-value of 0.05 with this small number of subjects is very, very, very powerful. And then if you look at oxygen support in the hospital and at home, it was even more significant. So again, with a small number of patients, to see this kind of results is very promising. We also pooled all of our safety data from the studies we've done. These were 3 studies done in infants. The age was 1 month to 6 months for the vast majority of the babies. We had 198 babies in here, 82 on control, and the rest were treated with nitric oxide. So you can see here, there's really no difference in the safety profile. And what we did also was we said, well, what's happening long-term? If we treat acutely with nitric oxide, what may happen in a year or 2 or 3 years? So we looked out, some of these babies were 7 years old when we tested them. And you can see here that nitric oxide actually, numerically looks better than control, but there's really no statistical difference. So the bottom line is acute safety is there. and long-term safety is there from using nitric oxide. So the last thing I'll show you is that we had to prove that 150 parts per million is the minimum therapeutic effective dose. So we ran 150 versus 85, and also each one against control. There's no difference between the control arm and the 85 parts per million, and 150 parts per million was statistically superior, not just to control, but also to 85 parts per million. Again, very powerful. This was in bronchiolitis or essentially pneumonia in infants, and we were able to use their length of stay in the hospital as the primary endpoint. Non-tuberculous mycobacteria, or NTM. NTM is not something many people have heard of. It's acquired, commonly found in water sources with warmer climates. These are people who are usually immunocompromised who get this infection. Limited players here. There's one approved product for this indication. Mostly antibiotics are used. The costs are in the billions, and we are targeting all NTM strains, but also the worst of them is called Mycobacterium abscessus. We're the only company that we know of that's had success in treating this refractory condition. So we ran a study in Australia. Cystic Fibrosis Foundation helped fund it. We had 14 days of intensive treatment, 4 times a day, and then we did twice a day for the following 10 weeks. The patients were in the hospital for the first 5 days to titrate and make sure there were no issues. So every patient was titrated to the maximum dose of 250 parts per million. There were no problems in the hospital. Everyone went home on 250 parts per million, and no one reduced their dose whatsoever. On the right-hand side, you can see that we had various strains for each patient. So here's safety data. Adverse events, we had one serious adverse event that was possibly related to nitric oxide. It's called hemoptysis. This is some bleeding. Wasn't really a problem, just had to be listed as possibly related. So we've never seen this happen before in any of the patients, but again, our medical staff believes it's to be irrelevant and insignificant. I'll take you down to treatment compliance on the left-hand side. I mean, you're looking at the compliance. I mean, this is 4 times a day, going to twice a day at home, 40 minutes each treatment. The device is over 20 pounds. It's not easy to administer. And we had a 94% compliance rate. That's a massive compliance rate. These patients liked this device. They liked how it made them feel. And you'll see from the next slide the impact on their lives. But we also look at safety. Methemoglobin and NO2 levels were well below the safety limits. So one of the most important things is to not have degradation in physical function and lung function. These patients are degrading in their activity. They can walk less and less every couple of months. Some of them are wheelchair bound. What we saw here is really no change in 6-minute walk or an activity tracker that we used and lung function. This is very important that we didn't see any degradation. Quality of life, the primary endpoint that FDA is requiring for approval, we won on every category you see here. Okay, so again, very powerful for the patient's lives. Now, what are we doing to the underlying infection? We did have success in reducing the bacterial load, very important. We only eradicated what we call culture conversion for these patients in 1 of the 15 subjects treated. We're pretty happy about that because it's very difficult to eradicate this. But to be able to control this condition and to have the improvement in quality of life is a big win. It's exactly what FDA asks for when you're looking for approval. So jumping into our autism program very quickly. This was a partnership with the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. So we've acquired the exclusive global commercial rights, not just to one compound, but several compounds. And they partially inhibit the activity of neuronal nitric oxide synthase, or nNOS. So this is one of those isoforms that I mentioned early in the presentation. Nitric oxide has been linked to autism in humans. That's for certain. And it's overproduction of the nitric oxide that's causing the problem. So all the preclinical work is being performed at Hebrew University. We've had multiple efficacy studies done. There are no FDA-approved therapies to treat autism. And of course, it is a massive unmet medical need. But again, this just reinforces that Beyond Air is the world leader in nitric oxide research. So very quickly, just a little bit of science here. For all you scientists out there, you probably know more than me. So NO plays a major role in neuronal function and synaptic transmission. This is well known. And the Amal lab, the name of the professor, Dr. Amal, at Hebrew University, showed that this overactivity is linked to autism spectrum disorder. Increased levels of nitrosative stress biomarkers, okay, which is caused by high levels of NO, are present in low-functioning autism patients, okay? So you have genetic mutations that cause alterations in the NO signaling, and you have synaptic and neuronal dysfunction, okay? Now we jump into the data. Real quick, there were three main tests: novel object recognition, social behavior, and anxiety. And, from this slide, you can see that the wild type mice are the healthy mice. Then you have M1 or M2. There were two different strains or two different mutations to cause autism. These are listed here. And then when you see the treated patients, okay, you'll see the difference. So the treated patients should look like the wild type patients, and they do in each one of these categories. And that's very important. So what we're doing is we're bringing back to baseline, to what a normal mouse would look like. We're bringing the autistic mouse back to what normal should be. And it's very exciting. These are just some of the things that I mentioned earlier and some of the milestones we've completed and some of the ones we're anticipating going forward. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. I thank everyone for listening and appreciate your time.
Steve, thank you again for joining us here at the conference and getting us up to speed on Beyond Air's accomplishments and opportunities. To anyone out there who is not already signed up for a Beyond Air one-on-one, please send me an email at weiss@lythampartners.com, or again, visit www.lythampartners.com/spring2024 and click on the one-on-one meeting request button. We hope you all enjoy the conference. Thank you again.